Written by Capable Solid. 3 weeks ago, a team of spec ops was deployed to Afghanistan to investigate an old Russian complex. The team was comprised of 3 members. 2 made it out. 1 died later of unknown causes. I was one of them. It started out just like any other sortie. Get in, get out, keep it simple. What we didn't expect was what we were after. Apparently Recon had discovered an old complex covered by sand, apparently undisturbed since its inception. The door was bolted shut. Wooden boards were nailed to the door. That didn't stop us from getting in. Marco, the demolition specialist, hooked a charge to the door. An electronically detonated explosive blew the door like tissue paper, and we made our way in. The door was heavy, about 4 inches thick, but the bolt was not sturdy enough to hold. As we made our way in, something struck Henry, the combat medic in our squad, by surprise.
Hey, you guys smell that?
I don't smell anything, Marco said, keeping focus on the open room.
Well, it smells like something rotting.
Keep an eye out. Will do, I said, keeping a mental note about the smell. As we moved through the complex, a slight banging noise was heard in the ventilation, and some of the air shafts were busted open strangely from inside of the shafts. I caught this and alerted Marco and Henry. Henry deduced that it could not have been done with explosives, as no shrapnel or blown out wall panels were present. Both he and I found this odd, and as we were investigating the shaft, we heard Henry shout out for us, followed by gunfire. 12 shots were fired, and we found Henry huddled in the corner of the room, shaking. What was in that room defied all logic. Bodies. There were bodies everywhere. Some were mutilated beyond all recognition. Others were stripped down to the bare bones. One corpse was split in half with its upper body hanging from the ceiling. His lower body was thrown onto the floor. The bodies looked to all be soldiers, 12 in total. The doors to the other rooms were covered in thick, greenish gunk, forming a sealant along the door. As proven by the corpse piled along the door, each one ripped to shreds. There was something else in that room, however. A long, sand-covered, worm-like creature lies still, with multiple holes peppering its roughly 7-foot-long body. Green, oily blood covered the floor around it, with Henry splattered with the blood. This was shocking. Henry was an experienced spec op, serving some time in the most harrowing, dangerous missions in the world. How could this break him? Marco was trying to get Henry to his feet. One of those things burst through the ceiling ventilation unit, grabbing Henry by the upper body, dragging him upwards. Henry flailed around, his screams muffled by the creature grabbing his body, now bringing him back to the waiting maw of the worm. Marco and I opened fire, but the worm would not budge, swiftly thrashing upwards, bringing Henry with it. We stood in horror as Henry screamed, followed by 6 shots from his pistol, and then an audible crunch. Marco and I ran as fast as we could, stumbling and tripping as we bolted towards the facility door. More of those things could be heard scuttling towards us, their shrill screech echoing through the walls of the facility. As they scrambled towards us, we slammed the facility door shut, the worm's bodies slamming into the heavy metal.
This is Alpha. Henry is KIA. Something took him into the vents. We can't fight them. This place needs to be destroyed. Requesting immediate evac.
Marco had panic and fear in his voice, shouting into the radio as the worm smashed into the door. We were attempting to get further away when the door broke open. The blockage of planks and bolts were the only things keeping them in. They burrowed into the sand and vanished. We were terrified seeing those things move with such speed through the loose sand. Marco opened fire on the mounds of sand that were now rushing towards us. I joined in and we killed one. The beasts were unstoppable, taking multiple assault rifle shots and still going. As we scrambled backwards, one of the things grabbed Marco by the legs, attempting to drag him into the sand. Marco dumped his remaining bullets into the worm. Before its body was riddled with holes, it sunk its razor-sharp teeth into Marco's legs. He screamed in agony as the wound started festering immediately. He scrambled to his feet, as did I, and we bolted farther into the desert. The helo arrived about 6 minutes later. The soldiers on board dropped out, but Marco protested heavily, saying that they would be taken into the sand. He was losing blood fast, and I protested with him, but those things swam through the sand like it was water, and they were ferocious in their hunt. We wasted no time getting out of there, lifting off as the worms leapt towards the helo. When we arrived at base, we were alerted that the area was bombed. When a spec ops team like ours needed air support or reinforcements, we were put on a high priority list of recovery, as our missions were vital to security. When the mission handler told us that the search team was to be sent out, I urged them not to, as those things would leave no trace of the team behind. I was told only today that Marco had died of his injuries, and that the infection from the bite was extreme, causing the skin to erode and large green lumps to form around the bite area. The only reason that I'm saying this is because I think that there are more of them out there. The Russians built that facility to study these things, and when they broke free, they sealed it off. More reports have been coming in about disappearances in the Afghan mountains and deserts, with little or no trace of the victims, only half-eaten corpses or shredded clothing. I'm praying now, praying that whatever these things are, they do not reach the cities of Afghanistan. They will cause untold havoc, deaths in the thousands, and they will not stop until nothing is left. I'm shipping back home to the States today, and I'm hoping that the worms do not reach another team like mine, alone searching for documents or files. Something about my transport is quite unnerving. It has been packed with samples from the site. How they got them is still a mystery, but they are on this plane. One crate is full of bodies, and I'm pretty sure that one is full of samples from the door covered in gunk, and one crate keeps shifting. And I swear I can hear a dim scraping of sand against the steel box. Written by the Cosmic Quill. A bond between siblings is a bond that cannot be broken by normal means. But what happened last week was not normal. I don't have all the answers, so I apologize in advance if some things seem vague. But I will tell the story of my brother's disappearance to the best of my ability. Last Friday, my brother was really going through it. Senior year of college, regulated to online, missing his friends and pissed about how his school planned to do graduation. Now, I didn't go to college, but my brother, 21, and I, 23, are so close in age that I could totally picture exactly how he was feeling at that moment. Sitting at the table, eating breakfast, fist clenched as he scrolled through the message from his college. I was really feeling for him. So I politely asked him to put down his phone. He did so and asked what I wanted. "Brian, I think we should go for a hike. I'm tired of staring at the same four walls all fucking day, and I know you are too," I said flatly. He immediately agreed. I wasn't just trying to get him to cheer up. I genuinely was feeling cabin fever pretty badly. So when he agreed to hiking, I was pretty excited. My family owns about 21 acres of wood behind our house. This section is connected to a larger forest, a much larger forest. Since we moved to this area, around the time Brian was 12, he and I absolutely loved exploring the woods. Our parents obviously gave us a long lecture on safety when in the woods, bought us thousands of dollars of safety gear, and insisted on us taking first aid courses just 4 months after we moved in. I didn't mind. These were all practical skills, and we got to use them on an area that we loved. The woods themselves were abundant with trees. There was rarely a break in the trees, so it was easy to get lost because everything looked the damn same. Thus, in addition to markers that marked the edge of our property, we nailed markers to certain trees to explain where we were inside the area. Brian and I had actually gotten lost once. 2 days after my high school graduation, Brian and I hung out outside the pop-up trailer I had set up about 14 acres back, just discussing what I wanted to do with my future. Angry that my mom kept pushing me to go off to college when I knew that wasn't what I wanted. We lost track of time and it was dark on our way home. It took an extra 40 minutes to emerge into our backyard, but other than that, Brian and I traversed the 21 acres with ease. Honestly, we never really had weird experiences in the woods until 2 days prior to Brian going missing. I wish I could say this phenomenon we experienced was something that we dealt with before. I wish I could put some local lore to what happened. Something to explain everything. But that just isn't the reality of the situation. Last Wednesday, my father rode his ATV out to the east edge of our property, where he has his own private garden, and according to him was absolutely shocked when he reached the scene. Not only was the garden torn up, the markers we used out there had been shredded. Trees surrounding the area had been cut with what looked like axe cuts, and both human and animal footprints littered the ground. Now, my father quickly waved the entire situation immediately as rowdy teens and their pets fucking up the area. So the entire family, including myself, saw the prospective hike Friday morning as a positive thing. Around 11 a.m. Friday, when my brother and I both walked out the back door and onto our backyard, he turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "I'm counting on this hike to give me some kind of clue on how to choose a path once I'm done with school. I'm totally ready for adult life." Now, of course, this could have just been sarcastic, but to think that Brian had been looking forward to something, and for what happened to happen, crushes my soul. I almost immediately knew that something was wrong when Brian and I first entered the woods. The vibes were just completely off. We'd been inside this area countless times, but never before did it feel as stomach-churning as it did as the moment we passed the bushes that lined the forest's edge. I half wanted to just say screw it and to ask Brian if he wanted to go home, but at the time he looked genuinely happy, and sometimes it feels really good to be the nice older brother. The first true weird event occurred about 15 minutes after we first entered. We were just about to get to the trailer when we both froze after the entire area was filled with the sound of what I can only describe as a booming mechanical screech. I knew Brian heard it as well, because when it came, Brian kept turning every which way to figure out where the sound was coming from. But the noise only lasted for a couple of minutes, so the only thing it accomplished was Brian and I rushing towards the trailer faster. The next odd incident occurred about 40 minutes later as Brian and I sat in the trailer, just venting to each other. Brian was in the middle of a rant about how he felt like part of his schooling experience was being robbed from him, when he looked past me and immediately stopped talking. In fact, once he looked past me, his face completely dropped and became quite pale. Obviously, I immediately asked him what was wrong, and about 10 seconds later, Brian slowly raised his finger and said, "Look." So I did. And honestly, the fear I felt in that moment could rival any other time I had been afraid of something tangible. Now, I didn't see it fully because by the time I was scanning the area, the figure was walking away from the trailer pretty far, and only a small bit of them was showing. But dear Lord, it was enough. Now, they looked completely humanoid, but their head was absolutely gigantic. I was only looking at it from the back as he started going down a hill, but his head literally resembled a light bulb. Obviously, the first thing I mentioned was what happened to Dad's garden, and how the person walking away was probably the douchebag who did it. Deep down, I knew I was lying to him and myself. Needless to say, not long after that, Brian and I made a mad dash away from the trailer. But soon, after getting into the heart of the wooded area, tragedy struck again. This time, as we looked into the trees and their markers so we knew where we were met with a truly disturbing sight. If the tree held a paper marker, it had burnt away. And if it had held a wooden one, they were obliterated and left on the ground beneath the tree. About 10 markers had been destroyed. Now we hit panic mode. Clearly, whoever was in the woods with us was either trying to screw with us really bad or genuinely wanted to harm us. My breathing quickened and my heart began to pound as I tried to remember the exact trail I had used when I left. Hell, I had years of experience inside those woods, but I had gotten so used to using the markers that I had lost complete touch of the forest. Neither Brian or I spoke as we frantically looked around for the correct path. We didn't have to. Our panicked breaths made our thoughts abundantly clear. Now, about 16 minutes into our situation, I noticed what I thought was a familiar tree, so I whipped around to tell Brian, but Brian was about 30 feet back, just staring at a tree, looking completely out of it. I had to literally slap him in the face to get him focused on leaving the forest. I will never forget the look on his face as he just stood there, eyes wide, jaw clenched. He was either amazed or incredibly angry. But anyway, a few minutes later, I had gotten Brian to calm down and appreciate the severity of the situation we were in. I audibly yelled in happiness as I realized we were on a familiar path, and that I thought I could get us home from there. So again, I turned to tell Brian the good news, but again he was far behind, just standing next to an oak tree staring intently at it. It was almost endearing and would have been a fond memory if the following event didn't take place. When I turned to him the second time honestly slowed. I was trying to look him straight in the eyes, but his eyes were darting all over the place. And the shaking. Brian was shaking like a leaf as he stood there, staring at the tree. Then it happened. An arm that I can only describe as hulking jetted out from behind the tree directly to the left of Brian. Its bare paw of a hand gripped Brian's collar, literally lifted him into the air, and at lightning fast speed, yanked him away. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing, because usually when I get extremely scared, I freeze up. But in this moment, I immediately made a mad dash to behind the large tree. When I made it there a few seconds later, I did not see my brother or his captor, but I believe I heard them. About 15 feet away, somewhere cloaked by the abundance of trees, I heard some sort of inhuman struggle grunt, feet pounding against the ground, and more chillingly, my brother screaming for help. I tried my fucking best. For about 20 minutes, I
tried following the noises, but it was almost as if they would always be too far ahead of me. So I decided to quickly double back and call the police to inform them what was happening. The police showed up about 12 minutes later. One officer sat me in the gazebo in our backyard, while about 4 other officers were in the woods, searching, yelling for Brian. I couldn't stop picturing the vein-covered, tree trunk-sized arm. I was a complete fucking mess. Since then, our entire community gathered together and slightly broke social distancing to comb the woods. We haven't found him yet. But they did find his pack on the ground and his smashed phone about 10 feet north of his pack. I've had family in and out of the house trying to be there for us. I've also been interviewed by the police 3 times, detailing every small event that happened that morning. Hell, on their 3rd visit, none of the police really looked like police. They looked more like businessmen. I can't sleep right. All I can hear are my brother's cries for help whenever I lie my head down. And it breaks me down each time. I partly feel responsible for suggesting the hike in the first place. I don't know, I'm just mentally drained at the moment. The only concrete thing I know is that I want my brother back. Written by Langster Gangster. As per the college curriculum, I am required to take some science classes for my general education credits. Considering all the horror stories of how bad biology and chemistry classes were, I figured geography would be one of the easier classes to take. Well, I didn't research into the exact geography class I was taking, so by the time I realized it was a decently tough class, it was too late. However, the starting stench of it wore off after a while, especially after getting help from my professor, Dr. Carter. Unlike most professors at my school, Dr. Carter tried to make his class as easy as possible. And he was more than willing to take time out of his day to sit with students and help teach the material. I met him during one of his office hours, once or twice every month, to get help on the material. And each time he made it so much easier to understand the work before me. Throughout our 6 or so meetings, I got to know Dr. Carter quite well. Even though he was a small and skinny middle-aged man, he was heavy into outdoor stuff. He had told us in class of some of his adventurous hiking in national parks, deep-sea diving, and exploring out into areas none of us had even heard of. It was very evident he was passionate about his hobbies, and I have a strong feeling that he would have done it full-time had he not become a teacher. Also, in our meetings, as we would wrap up going over material, Dr. Carter would ask me how things were going. He always liked to hear how his students were handling other classes, and just college life in general. He would share what he was currently trying to do at the moment, which was mostly exploring. During our last meeting in person together, he told me that he was having trouble searching for some mine shaft out in a desert-like area on the outskirts of the university's town. "I've been trying to find it for a month now," he told me. "I've been exploring and hiking in that area for a while, and not once did I ever see it. But on that day, I found it there. I don't know how to describe it." "What did you say it was again?" I asked him. "It was a mine shaft, or cave," he said. "I think it was the former because its entrance was a large hole in the ground, and the only way to go down inside it was by using a connected ladder. I know that area like the back of my hand, and I have been there every weekend since I've seen it, but I haven't seen it since." "So why do you keep looking for it?" I asked. "It might have been a mirage or something like that." I felt something while I was there. This feeling of bliss. Like whatever was down there was nothing but amazing. I know it sounds weird, but I had never felt a feeling like that before in my life, and I want to feel it again. His gray eyes were full of fascination and desperation. If it wasn't evident by how much he wanted to find it by how he was speaking, the look in his eyes made it crystal clear. "Look, that might be a bad idea," I said. I don't know why, but I felt that something was off about this mine shaft. "Oh, I know. The whole thing sounds sketchy for sure. But I have to prove to myself that what I saw was in fact real. And I really want to experience that feeling again and explore what is down there." Both perplexed and creeped out by his fascination for this mysterious mine shaft, I decided to leave. I told Dr. Carter to be careful, and that if he ever found it again, to let me know. He told me he would, and I walked out of his office. That was the last time I saw Dr. Carter before our school shut down due to the pandemic. Later that week, he sent us an email stating that he was going to post all of our remaining homework and class activities online, and that he would be available via video conference in case we needed help with anything. Since I just wanted to get everything over with, I decided to complete all of the homework way before the end of the year. After doing so, all that was left to do was to wait for the final exam. We had taken our latest exam the day before the official shutdown, so this would be the only exam being given online for the class. I found the last part of the material pretty understandable, so I felt no need to ever contact Dr. Carter. And the story of that mine shaft fell into the back compartment of my brain. Dr. Carter would still email us once or twice a week, letting us know of any errors or updates to any remaining homework and such. He also sent a link to use in order to contact him in case we had any questions or concerns regarding the class. However, he sent his last email to the class 2 weeks ago. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Some of the other students in our class's group chat also mentioned that they noticed Dr. Carter hadn't been answering any emails or video calls for a while now. With the exam inching closer and closer, many of the students began to freak out more and more. He had told us early on what the exam would be on, but of course there were other students who wanted to talk to him just one more time before the exam took place. Part of me did worry for Dr. Carter. In fact, after remembering our last meeting, I began wondering if he indeed had found the mine shaft, but either got hurt or stuck without alerting anyone beforehand. It's not like I could do much to help. He never told me where exactly he had seen this place, and I lived in another city, so I had no clue where to even look. Still, I sent an email to both Dr. Carter and the head of the geography department in my school. The department head responded very quickly, saying that she had been hearing about him not replying back, and that if she didn't hear back within 24 hours, then she would be calling the police to perform a wellness check. She promised to update me if she heard back, and I told her I would do the same. This morning, I heard my phone ding with an email notification. I looked to see I had received an email from Dr. Carter. I let out a sigh of relief as I opened it, expecting to see another update about the exam or an email from him personally saying that he was okay. Instead, all it contained was a link. I checked back to his older emails, and it was the same link he used for other people to video call him with. I did feel slightly concerned when I noticed that. Why would he send just the link to his students? But then I noticed that I seemed to be the only person receiving this email. To clarify, the to bar in each of his emails would be jam-packed with 100 other email addresses, as he always sent out his emails in one large group. In this email, however, it was just me. I don't know why, but something felt very, very wrong about this email. Yet I still wanted to make sure he was at least alive, so I decided to click the link and call him. I sat in the waiting room for about 5 minutes, and just when I was about to leave, I heard the other end pick up. "Hello," Dr. Carter said in a weird, almost completely different voice. I looked up and felt chills go down my spine. Dr. Carter was staring back at me through the computer with this large smile plastered on his face. But then I noticed some other peculiarities. Part of his hair looked like it had been ripped out of his scalp. Some of his front teeth were now gone, and he had several bruises on his face. His eyes were also open as wide as possible. Hi, Doctor," I said. "So good to see you again," he responded, the smile still wide on his lips. Did you find the place you were looking for?" I asked him. "Oh, indeed. I went down there, and can you guess what I found?" I remained silent, not finding the ability to open my mouth and speak out of fear. "Go on, guess." "That feeling you felt?" I said, a quiver of fear in my voice. "Yes, but not only that, I have even found a gift for my troubles. I found some new friends." "Wait, what?" "You know, I kind of wish the others could have come with me, because they all wanted to leave. I could only bring one home, though. I couldn't fit the rest. The remaining ones still need a new home, but more people need to come visit them for that to happen. It would be quite an adventure, indeed." I was petrified as I watched him gleefully say this, his eyes and smile seemingly getting wider. I truly thought Dr. Carter had lost his mind, and what I was experiencing before me was a Class A breakdown. "I even found it on a map so I can show it to you. That way you can go on your own if you want." Dr. Carter got up from his chair and began walking to a closet behind him. That's when things got scarier. His walk was so deformed. I can't even describe it correctly because the closest thing I can think of is all the bones in his legs were broken, but he could still manage to hold all of his weight. I looked at his pants, and I noticed what appeared to be claw marks running up and down his pants. Then I noticed the back of his shirt was also ripped, and a major open wound was visible inside of the holes. He turned back to the camera while carrying the map, and I became fixated on the crazy look in his eyes. That's when I noticed something I had missed earlier that made my stomach drop and all the blood inside me turn to ice. His once gray eyes were now the color blue. Doctor, what happened to your eyes?" I asked as I moved my cursor over to the end call button, anticipating the worst. Dr. Carter stopped walking and dropped the map to the ground. He looked up at me, and I discovered his smile had disappeared. His face began contorting into one of extreme anger and astonishment, like I had discovered his darkest secret. Then Dr. Carter opened his mouth almost twice as large as any human could and let out the most inhuman, ear-piercing shriek I had ever heard. I threw my headphones away from my head while I clicked the end call button just as Dr. Carter lunged towards the screen. I sat in my chair, catching my breath for a few minutes. I then called the police to let them know what had just happened. The dispatcher told me that she would be sending an officer over to my house to take my statement, and that she would be contacting Dr. Carter's town's police department to check on him. Since I lived a bit of the way outside my town, I knew it would take some time for the police to arrive at my house. I called my mom, whose place of employment was still open despite the pandemic, to let her know what just happened. Given how distressed I was on the phone, she told me she was on her way home and would let me know when she got into the neighborhood. I sat in my room, practically shaking from the fear inside of me. About 10 minutes later, I heard a knock on the door and a muffled voice saying, "Police." I got up and quickly approached the door. As I passed the main window, I saw both my mom's car and the police car parked in the driveway. I checked my phone, but the last text I had gotten from my mom was the day prior. She always texted me when she got in the neighborhood, yet her car was parked and empty in our driveway. Then I heard the voice say, "Police," again, and I felt my entire world collapse around me when I realized it was the same voice I had first heard come from Dr. Carter.